But we never really know how they perform in actual conditions. You're telling me they survived a typhoon? Multiple typhoons, sir. Direct hits from artillery shrapnel. Bombing raids. Daily tropical rainstorms. They keep standing. The arch principle. Merrill pulled out his original design sketches, yellowed papers covered in calculations. When I was developing this in '41, everyone said I was crazy. They wanted traditional rectangular buildings. I kept insisting, the arch is the strongest shape. Ancient technology, proven over millennia. Just needed to apply it with modern materials. The corrugated steel was brilliant too, Webb added. Gives it rigidity while keeping it light enough to transport and handle manually. That was practical necessity. We needed something that could be shipped in sections, assembled without cranes, and still be structurally sound. The corrugations solved multiple problems simultaneously: strength, weight, water resistance, ease of manufacture. Merrill smiled. But I'll tell you a secret, Chief Webb. When I designed this, I thought maybe we'd build a few hundred of them. Useful but niche. I never imagined. He gestured out the window at the field of Quonset Hut stretching to the horizon. I never imagined this. That it would become the standard. That tens of thousands would be built. That they'd save lives across the Pacific. Your design did that, sir. No, Merrill corrected gently. The design enabled it. But you and men like you made it real. A design is just lines on paper until someone builds it. And not just builds it, proves it works, improves it, teaches others to replicate it. That's the difference between theory and practice. That's where engineering becomes reality. Webb thought about that. The relationship between design and execution. Between the person who imagines the solution and the people who make it work in the real world. Both necessary. Neither sufficient alone. Can I ask you something, sir? Of course. When you were designing this, did you think about the men who'd be building it? In mud, under fire, with no equipment? Merrill was quiet for a long moment. Honestly? No. I was thinking about structural principles, material properties, manufacturing processes. I was solving an engineering problem. I didn't think much about the human element, the people who'd have to make it work in impossible conditions. He met Webb's eyes. That was a failure of imagination on my part. You've taught me that design has to consider not just what's being built, but who's building it and under what conditions. The field crews have made lots of modifications, Webb said. Techniques for soft ground, ways to handle mismatched components, methods for working without heavy equipment. Should I document those? Absolutely. In fact. Merrill pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. Let's do it now. Tell me every modification, every trick, every lesson learned. We'll incorporate them into the official technical manuals. Your field experience will improve the training for every crew that comes after. They worked through the afternoon, Webb describing, Merrill sketching and noting. By the end, they had pages of field-tested improvements, everything from foundation stabilization techniques to rapid panel installation methods to weatherproofing tricks. This is going to save lives, Merrill said as they finished. Every hour we can shave off construction time, every technique that makes it easier to build in difficult conditions, that's men housed faster, supplies protected better, medical facilities operational sooner. Lives saved. Webb stood to leave, then paused. Sir, can I ask you one more thing? Why the arch? I mean, I understand the structural principles, but why that specific solution? Merrill smiled. Because the simplest solution is usually the best solution. We could have designed something more complex, multiple structural members, complex joinery, fancy engineering. But complex systems fail in complex ways. The arch is simple. It's been working for thousands of years because it follows fundamental physical laws. You can't argue with physics. Simple but elegant. Exactly. That's the goal of all good engineering. Find the solution that's just complex enough to work, no more. Anything extra is just opportunity for failure. Merrill shook Webb's hand. Thank you for coming, Chief. Thank you for making my design work in the real world. And thank you for teaching others to do the same. Walking out of Quonset Point that evening, Webb felt something he hadn't felt since before the war, a sense of completion. Of having done something that mattered, that would last beyond the immediate moment. He'd built buildings. And those buildings had saved lives. And others were building more buildings that would save more lives. It was a chain of causality that stretched forward into an uncertain future, but it was real. It was tangible. It was enough. Scene 16, The Philippines. September 1944. Leyte Gulf, Philippines. Webb watched from the deck of a transport ship as the invasion fleet assembled, hundreds of vessels, the largest naval force ever assembled in the Pacific. Somewhere in that armada were crates of Quonset Hut components, waiting to go ashore as soon as the Marines secured the beachhead. Thinking about Guadalcanal? Kowalski asked, joining him at the rail. Always. That's where we figured it out. Everything since has just been refinement. You hear they're calling us the Quonset Battalion now? Like it's our official name? Webb hadn't heard that, but it made sense. In 9 months, his crews had trained over 2,000 men in Quonset construction. Those men had trained others. The knowledge was spreading geometrically, and everywhere it spread, infrastructure appeared with remarkable speed. The brass loves us because we make them look good, Webb said. They take an island, and within a week they've got functional bases. Makes the logistics officers look like geniuses. Are you complaining about being appreciated? Just noting the politics. The bombardment began at dawn, battleship guns pounding the beaches, preparing the way for the assault. Webb watched dispassionately. He'd seen this before. He knew what came after, the chaos, the casualties, the desperate need for infrastructure to support operations. His job began after the shooting stopped. After the Marines did their work, the Seabees would do theirs. 3 days later, Webb waded ashore on Leyte Beach. The fighting had moved inland, but the beach was still chaos, equipment being unloaded, supplies piling up, wounded being evacuated, commanders shouting orders, the organized chaos of military logistics. Lieutenant Morrison met him, same Marine lieutenant from Guadalcanal, now promoted to captain, still mud-covered, still looking exhausted. Chief Webb. Thought I'd never see you again after Guadalcanal. Seems we're destined to keep crossing paths, Captain. Where do you need us? Everywhere. Field hospital first, we're using tents again and losing patients to exposure. Then supply depot, typhoons forecast in 4 days. Then barracks for the incoming reinforcements. Standard priority list. How much space for building? Cleared a site about a mile inland. Best ground we could find. It's not great, still muddy, still jungle, but it's better than the beach. Webb surveyed the area. It was indeed better than Guadalcanal, but that was damning with faint praise. We'll have the first huts up in 12 hours. Full hospital operational in 36. 12 hours? Morrison looked skeptical. Chief, I know you're good, but... Captain, since Guadalcanal I've built over 50 Quonset huts and trained 2,000 men to build more. 12 hours isn't boasting. It's a conservative estimate. They made it in 10 hours. Webb's crews moved with practiced efficiency, each man knowing his role, no wasted motion. Foundation preparation, 90 minutes. Rib assembly and erection, 4 hours. Panel installation, 3 hours. End walls and finishing, 90 minutes. The rhythm was automatic now, muscle memory and practiced coordination. The local Navy commander came by to watch, standing with his hands on his hips as the first Quonset hut took shape before his eyes. "I'll be damned," he muttered. "It's like watching a time-lapse film. Practice and training." "Sir," Webb replied. "And a good design to start with. How many can you build per day?" "With my crew?" "4, comfortably. Push it, maybe 6. But you don't want us pushed. Tired crews make mistakes, and mistakes in construction mean failures in operation. For a day is more than enough. At that rate, we'll have the entire base infrastructure complete in 2 weeks." "Yes, sir. That's the plan." By the end of October, Haiti had been transformed. 40 Quonset huts in an organized grid, a small city of metal that housed hospital, barracks, supply depots, maintenance facilities, command centers. Everything needed to support the campaign to retake the Philippines. General MacArthur himself came to inspect the facilities. Webb stood at attention while the general walked through one of the hospital huts, examining the beds, the equipment, the structure itself. "Who designed these buildings?" MacArthur asked. "Otto Merrill, sir, at Quonset Point in 1941. "And who built them here?" "Naval Construction Battalion 54, sir. My crews." MacArthur studied him for a long moment. "Chief, in warfare, we often talk about strategic advantages, superior weapons, better training, numerical superiority. But logistics is what wins wars. The ability to project power, to sustain forces in the field, to maintain momentum. These buildings." He gestured around the interior. "These represent a strategic advantage. The ability to establish operational infrastructure rapidly gives us flexibility our enemies can't match. You've contributed materially to this campaign's success." "Thank you, sir. Just doing our job." "Your job happens to be vital." MacArthur turned to his aide. "Make a note. I want Quonset hut construction prioritized in all future operations. First wave goes ashore, second wave builds infrastructure. Standard operating procedure." After MacArthur left, Harrison found Webb outside, smoking another of Kowalski's cigarettes. "You heard the general. You're now officially part of standard operating procedure." "Lucky me." "He's right though. What we're doing, what you pioneered, has changed how we fight. Island by island across the Pacific, Quonset huts are following the front lines. Housing troops, protecting supplies, sheltering wounded. It's a revolution in military logistics, and you're at the center of it." Webb stubbed out the cigarette. "Sir, with respect, I'm not at the center of anything. I'm just a construction worker who got good at building one specific thing. There are hundreds of crews now doing exactly what we do. I'm not special. You were first. You proved it could be done. You established the techniques others follow. That makes you special whether you accept it or not." Harrison paused. "You know what happens when this war ends? We go home. Eventually. But first, someone's going to have to rebuild. All these islands we've fought over, they'll need infrastructure, civilian buildings, schools, hospitals. And guess what design is proven, flexible, quick to build, and suitable for tropical conditions?" Webb saw where this was going. "Quonset huts." "Exactly. This design we've been using for military purposes, it's going to become standard civilian architecture across the Pacific. Maybe across the world. Housing for refugees. Emergency shelters for disaster relief. Temporary facilities during reconstruction. The applications are endless." "That's... I hadn't thought about that." "Start thinking about it. Because when this war ends, your expertise isn't going to become obsolete. It's going to become even more valuable. The world is going to need builders, Chief. Good ones. Fast ones. Ones who can create shelter from nothing in impossible conditions." Webb looked at the grid of Quonset huts, lights beginning to glow in windows as evening fell. 40 buildings that hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. Housing hundreds of men, protecting millions of dollars of supplies, enabling operations that would eventually win the war. Maybe, he said finally. We'll see. Part 5, The Meaning. Scene 17, Iwo Jima. February 1945. The black sand beaches of Iwo Jima. Webb had seen a lot of combat zones in the past year and a half. But Iwo Jima was different. The volcanic island was essentially a fortress, every inch defended, every cave and tunnel a potential ambush. The invasion was brutal, thousands of casualties in the first hours, Marines fighting for every yard of ground. The Seabees went ashore on D+2, after the initial beachhead was secured but while fighting still raged inland. Webb's crews landed with full construction gear, ready to build even as artillery shells occasionally whistled overhead. "This is insane," Peterson said, ducking reflexively as an explosion boomed in the distance. "This is necessary," Webb corrected. "Those Marines up there need supply lines. Need medical evacuation. Need a functional base to operate from. We provide that." They found their building site, black volcanic sand that provided surprisingly solid foundation, but exposed to enemy observation from the high ground. Several times during construction, they had to take cover as Japanese artillery targeted their position. But they kept building. The first Quonset hut went up in 12 hours, despite interruptions. The second in 10 hours. By the fourth day, they had 8 huts operational, enough for a field hospital that was desperately needed as casualties mounted. Commander Phillips was there again, the same medical officer from Guadalcanal, now promoted but still hands-on in the operating room. He found Webb during a rare break. "Chief, I need to show you something." He led Webb into the hospital hut. Inside, every bed was full. Corpsmen moved between patients, checking vitals, administering medication, changing bandages. The smell of antiseptic and blood was overwhelming. "See that Marine in bed 12? Phillips pointed to a young man, probably 19, bandaged across the chest, sleeping restlessly. "Took shrapnel yesterday. Collapsed lung, internal bleeding. We operated on him 3 hours ago." In a tent hospital, in these conditions, his survival odds would be maybe 50-50. Here, in a clean, sterile, weatherproof facility? 90%. Maybe higher. He moved to another bed. Bed 18, lost his leg below the knee. Traumatic amputation. Again, in a tent hospital, infection risk is enormous. Here, we can keep the wound clean, control the environment, give him the best possible chance to heal without complications. "Sir, I understand." "No, I don't think you do." Phillips's voice was intense. "I've been a surgeon for 15 years. I've saved hundreds of lives. Maybe thousands. But these buildings you've built? They're saving more lives than I ever could alone. Every wounded man who recovers in a clean facility instead of dying from infection in a tent, that's because of what you do. Not medicine. Engineering. Architecture. Whatever you want to call it. You're saving lives, Chief. Own it." Webb looked at the rows of beds, the men fighting to survive, the medical staff fighting to save them. All of it made possible by corrugated steel and arch principles and foundation bolts. "I build buildings," he said quietly. "That's all I know how to do. Then keep building them. Because every building saves lives." Scene 18, The Letter Home. That night, by lamplight in his own quarters, a Quonset hut, naturally, Webb finally wrote to his mother. He'd been putting it off for weeks, uncertain what to say, how to explain what he was doing, why it mattered. "Dear Mom. I'm sorry I haven't written more often. Life out here is busy, and by the time each day ends, I'm usually too exhausted to do anything but sleep. I want to try to explain what I've been doing. I know my letters home have been vague, construction work doesn't really capture it. But I wasn't sure how to describe it in a way that would make sense. We build buildings. That's the simple version. But they're not normal buildings. They're these metal structures called Quonset huts, invented just a few years ago. They're basically big steel tubes, semicircular, made of corrugated metal panels. They look like nothing you've ever seen. Like half a tin can lying on its side, big enough to walk inside. The genius is how simple they are. No complex carpentry, no masonry, no skilled labor required. Just steel panels that bolt together following basic principles. The shape is an arch, and you remember how I used to bore you talking about arches when I was studying engineering? How the Romans used them, how they're the strongest shape. Well, these buildings prove it. We've built them through typhoons, bombardments, tropical storms. They just keep standing. I've lost count of how many we've built. 50? 75? And I've trained hundreds of other men to build them. They're spreading across the Pacific like a wave, following the war, providing shelter and support wherever they're needed. The medical officers tell me these buildings are saving lives. They keep wounded men clean and dry, which prevents infections, which means more soldiers survive to go home to their families. I hadn't thought about it that way until recently. I just thought I was doing my job, building what needed building. But maybe that's what matters, just doing the work that needs doing, without overthinking it, without making it about ego or recognition. There's a satisfaction in that. In seeing a problem, understanding the solution, and executing it well. I don't know when I'll be home. The war isn't over yet. But when I do get back, I think I want to keep building. Not just military structures, but civilian buildings, houses, communities. Because I've learned something out here in the Pacific, shelter matters. Having a roof over your head, a dry place to sleep, walls that protect you from the elements, that's fundamental to human dignity. We take it for granted back home. We've always had buildings, always had shelter. But out here, you see what it's like without it. You see men living in mud, sleeping under tarps, trying to recover from wounds while exposed to rain and insects and heat. And then you build something that changes that provides real shelter, and you see the difference it makes. I'm rambling. It's late, and I'm tired. But I wanted you to know that I'm doing okay. Doing more than okay. I'm doing work that matters, with people I respect, solving problems that have real consequences. Tell the girls I miss them. Tell them their brother is building things that help people. Tell them that when this war is over, I'm going to build them the best house in Brooklyn. Love. Marcus. He read it over, decided it was as close to the truth as he could get, and sealed the envelope. Whether his mother would understand, he wasn't sure. But he'd tried. Scene 19, Okinawa. April 1945. The final major battle of the Pacific War. Okinawa was massive compared to the previous islands, a substantial landmass requiring extensive infrastructure to support the enormous American force assembled for the invasion. Webb's crews were part of a massive construction effort, not just Quonset huts, but roads, airfields, depots, the full logistical apparatus of modern warfare. But the Quonset huts were the foundation of everything else. They went up first, providing immediate shelter and facilities, allowing other construction to proceed from a stable base. By now, the technique was refined to an art form. Webb could look at a plot of ground and immediately visualize where the huts would go, how they'd be oriented, how drainage would work, where utilities would run. His crews worked with choreographed precision, each man knowing his role, minimal communication needed. They built the first 10 huts in 3 days. The next 20 in a week. By the end of April, Okinawa had over 100 trities continued Quonset huts, a sprawling base that supported tens of thousands of troops, hundreds of aircraft, and the entire logistical infrastructure for the campaign. And then, on a humid afternoon in May, something unexpected happened. Webb was supervising the construction of a storage facility when a jeep pulled up, carrying a naval officer he didn't recognize. The officer stepped out, consulted a clipboard, and approached. "Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb?" "That's me, sir. Captain Richard Holloway, Bureau of Yards and Docks. I need to speak with you. Privately." They walked to a quieter area, away from the construction noise. Captain Holloway was a tall man. Probably mid-40s, with the bearing of someone who'd spent his career behind a desk but commanded respect nonetheless. "Chief Webb, I've been reviewing construction reports from across the Pacific Theater. Your name appears in 47 separate commendations from commanding officers at various installations. You've personally overseen the construction of 83 Quonset huts and trained an estimated 3,000 personnel in construction techniques. If you say so, sir." "I haven't been counting. The Bureau has been counting. We've also been analyzing construction efficiency metrics. Bases where you've trained the crews show 35% faster build times and significantly lower defect rates compared to crews trained through standard methods." Webb wasn't sure where this was going. "The design is good, sir. Makes it hard to mess up. The design is excellent. But design alone doesn't account for the performance differential. Your training methodology, your field modifications, your problem-solving approaches, those are what make the difference." Holloway pulled out a folder. "The Navy wants to formalize that knowledge. We're creating a comprehensive training program for post-war construction, and we want you to head it." "Sir, I'm a construction chief, not an instructor. You've been instructing for over a year now. And doing it better than our professional trainers." Holloway opened the folder, showing detailed curriculum plans. "This would be a permanent assignment. Shore duty, based at Quonset Point. You'd oversee training for all CB construction battalions. Develop curricula, write technical manuals, establish standards. The war's ending, Chief. Japan can't hold out much longer. But the need for construction expertise won't end. Rebuilding will take years, maybe decades. We need people who understand rapid deployment, resource-constrained environments, improvisation under pressure." Webb looked at the curriculum plans, the organizational charts, the scope of what was being proposed. It was enormous, a complete training infrastructure, potentially affecting thousands of men, influencing construction practices across the military and eventually the civilian sector. "I'm not qualified for this, sir. You're the most qualified person we have. You've done it in the field, under the worst possible conditions, and succeeded consistently. That's qualification enough." Holloway's voice softened slightly. "Think about it, Chief. This isn't just about buildings. It's about establishing best practices, institutional knowledge that will outlast any individual. What you've learned, what you've developed, it's too valuable to lose when you rotate out. Can I have time to consider? You have until Japan surrenders. After that, I need an answer." Scene 20, The Last Hut. August 6, 1945. Okinawa. Webb was installing the final panel on what would be his last Quonset hut, at least his last one during the war, when someone shouted from across the construction site. "Chief! Radio! Emergency broadcast!" They gathered around a portable radio, a crowd of Seabees and Marines and support personnel. The announcer's voice crackled through static, but the words were clear enough. A new type of bomb, possessing unprecedented destructive power, was dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima today. President Truman has announced that this atomic bomb represents a revolutionary development in weaponry. The crowd was silent, trying to process the information. A single bomb. An entire city. Destruction beyond anything previously imagined. "Jesus Christ," Kowalski whispered. "One bomb?" 3 days later, another bomb fell on Nagasaki. 5 days after that, Japan surrendered. The war was over. Webb stood outside the completed Quonset Hut, number 84, though who was counting, and tried to feel something. Relief? Joy? Triumph? But all he felt was exhaustion and a strange sense of anticlimax. "We won," Peterson said, appearing beside him. The kid who'd been terrified on Guadalcanal was now a seasoned builder, confident in his skills. "It's over, Chief. We actually won." "Yeah. You don't sound happy." "I'm happy. I'm also tired. And wondering what the hell I'm going to do now. Go home. Build houses. Live a normal life. I'm not sure I remember what normal looks like." Around them, the base was celebrating, men cheering, bottles being passed around, impromptu parties breaking out. But Webb felt disconnected from it, like he was watching through glass. Harrison found him an hour later, sitting alone in the completed Quonset Hut, the interior still empty, just curved steel and shadows. "Thought I'd find you here," Harrison said, sitting down beside him on the bare floor. "Seemed appropriate. Last one I'll build." "Actually, about that." Harrison pulled out a letter, official Navy stationery, multiple signatures. "Your orders came through. You're being transferred to Quonset Point, effective immediately upon return to the States. Training command. Just like Captain Holloway discussed." Webb took the letter, scanning it without really reading. "I never said yes. You never said no. And the Navy decided you're too valuable in training to waste on construction crews. They're right, by the way. I'm a builder. That's what I do. You're a teacher now. That's what you'll do. Marcus, look at me." Harrison waited until Webb met his eyes. "You've done something remarkable here. Not just building structures, but developing a system, a methodology, a body of knowledge that will outlast both of us. If you go home and build houses, that's fine, that's good work. But if you take this assignment, you'll influence how construction is done for the next generation. Maybe longer. Which has more impact?" Webb thought about the 84 Quonset huts he'd built. Thought about the thousands of men he'd trained. Thought about the wounded soldiers who'd recovered in clean facilities instead of dying in tents. Thought about the chain of causality extending forward, buildings built because he taught people to build them, lives saved because those buildings existed. "Teaching doesn't feel like real work," he said finally. "That's because you've spent 2 years in combat zones where real work meant life or death. But teaching is real work. Maybe the most important work. How do you think I became a good engineer? Someone taught me. How do you think Otto Merrill learned to design? Someone taught him. Knowledge doesn't spontaneously generate, it has to be passed on. When do I report?" "Ship leaves in 2 weeks. Takes you back to San Diego, then across to Rhode Island. You'll have a month to get settled before the first training class starts." Harrison stood, offering his hand. "It's been an honor serving with you, Chief. I mean that. You made me look like a genius because you made my impossible assignments possible." Webb shook his hand. "You gave good orders, sir. Made the impossible seem reasonable." After Harrison left, Webb sat alone in the empty Quonset hut for a long time. The curved steel walls rose around him, elegant and functional, form following function in the purest sense. He thought about the first time he'd seen these components on Guadalcanal, a pile of parts that seemed impossible to assemble into anything useful. He thought about the exhausted nights, the tropical storms, the bombing raids, the constant pressure of lives depending on work done quickly and done right. He thought about Otto Merrill sitting at a drafting table in 1941, imagining a solution to a problem that didn't fully exist yet. Converting theory into lines on paper, lines into specifications, specifications into manufactured components. Then Webb and thousands of men like him converting those components into actual buildings that actually sheltered actual people. The chain from imagination to implementation to impact. That was engineering. That was construction. That was what he'd been doing, even if he'd never articulated it that way. And now he'd teach others to do the same. Kowalski appeared in the doorway, backlit by the setting sun. They're having a party at the officers' club. Real party, with real booze, someone liberated from somewhere. You coming? Yeah, Webb said, standing and brushing volcanic dust off his uniform. Yeah, I'm coming. They walked across the base toward the sounds of celebration. Around them, Quonset huts stood in orderly rows, light spilling from windows, voices echoing from interiors. A temporary city built from nothing, housing thousands, functioning smoothly because someone had figured out the right way to build it. What are you going to do after this? Kowalski asked. Teach. Navy's making me a training instructor. That'll be weird. Chief Webb the teacher. Tell me about it. You'll be good at it though. You've always been good at explaining things, making complicated stuff seem simple. That's because most complicated stuff is actually simple once you understand the principles. People just make it complicated by adding unnecessary elements. See? There you go, teaching already. Kowalski grinned. You're going to hate this, but I'm proud of you, Chief. What you did out here, training all of us, building all these structures, figuring out how to make it work when nobody else could, that mattered. That made a difference. Webb didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They walked in companionable silence toward the party, toward the celebration of a war ending and a peace beginning. Behind them, the Quonset huts stood silent in the twilight, curved metal gleaming dully, serving their purpose without complaint or fanfare. Just buildings. Simple buildings made from simple principles, assembled by ordinary men using ordinary tools, solving extraordinary problems through nothing more magical than good design and hard work. Webb smiled slightly. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that had always been enough. Epilogue, Quonset Point, 1946. Scene 21, Full Circle. Spring came to Rhode Island with a vengeance. After the oppressive heat of the Pacific, the cool Atlantic breezes felt miraculous. Webb stood outside the training facility at Quonset Point, watching a new class of Seabees struggle with their first rib assembly. No, 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 he called out. Johnson, you're torquing that bolt too tight. See the metal starting to deform? Back it off. The young seaman, couldn't have been more than 20, nodded nervously and adjusted his technique. Webb watched for a few more minutes, then turned to find Otto Merrill standing beside him, hands in pockets, expression amused. You're a natural teacher, Merrill observed. I'm bossy and opinionated. Not the same thing. In construction, sometimes they are the same thing. Merrill gestured at the training site, where 3 separate crews were working on Quonset assembly at different stages. You know what I like about this? We're not just teaching them to build, we're teaching them to think. To understand why each step matters. That's real education. That's what you taught me when I visited in '44. That design has to consider the builder, not just the structure. And you taught me that field experience has to inform design. We've both learned from each other. Merrill pulled out a rolled paper, new technical drawings. Want to see what we're working on? Webb unrolled the plans. It was a modified Quonset design, longer, with a higher arch, larger door openings. More refined details, better ventilation systems, improved panel connections. The Mark II, Merrill explained. Incorporating 2 years of field feedback, mostly from you and your reports. Stronger, more versatile, easier to assemble. We're going to start manufacturing them next month. For what? The war's over. For everything else. Disaster relief. Emergency housing. Refugee camps. Reconstruction in Europe and Asia. Agricultural storage. Industrial facilities in remote locations. The applications are endless, Marcus. The war proved the concept. Now we apply it to peace. Webb studied the drawings, seeing the improvements, understanding how each change addressed problems he'd encountered in the field. This was the evolution of design, practical experience feeding back into theoretical development, creating better solutions. There's something else, Merrill said, pulling out another document. The Army Corps of Engineers wants to license the design for civilian use. There are companies interested in manufacturing Quonset huts for commercial sale. Farmers want them for equipment storage. Small businesses want them for warehouses. There's even talk of using them for housing developments, row houses made from modified Quonsets. That seems weird? Revolutionary? Both? Welcome to the future, Chief Webb. The war changed everything, including how we think about building. Fast, flexible, functional architecture isn't just military anymore. It's going to become part of civilian life. A commotion from the training site drew their attention. One of the crews had successfully raised their first complete arch rib. The young men stood staring at it, clearly surprised they'd managed to make the impossible structure stand. Webb remembered that feeling. That moment of watching metal become shelter, theory become reality. I need to go correct their guy line technique before they let it fall over, he said. Before you go, one question. Do you regret it? The training assignment instead of going home? Webb thought about that. Thought about Brooklyn and his family and the normal life he could have had. Then thought about the classroom full of eager students, the knowledge being passed on, the chain of causality extending forward into an uncertain future. No, he said finally. No regrets. Someone has to teach the next generation. Might as well be someone who's actually built these things in the worst possible conditions. That's what I thought you'd say. Merrill smiled. You know what you're creating here? Not just trained builders. You're creating a philosophy of construction, rapid deployment, resource efficiency, elegance through simplicity. That philosophy will outlast both of us. It's just buildings, Otto. No, Marcus. It's never just buildings. Buildings are how we impose order on chaos. They're how we create shelter from exposure. They're how we take care of each other. What you did in the Pacific, what you're teaching here, that's about human dignity. About providing what people need to survive and thrive. That's not just buildings. That's civilization. Webb thought about the wounded men on Guadalcanal, recovering in dry beds instead of dying in mud. Thought about soldiers sleeping in protected barracks instead of collapsing tents. Thought about supplies preserved and operations enabled and lives saved. Maybe, he conceded. Maybe you're right. Of course I'm right. I'm an engineer. Merrill clapped him on the shoulder. Now go save those poor kids before they drop that rib on someone's foot. Webb jogged toward the training site, already shouting corrections. Behind him, Otto Merrill watched with satisfaction, seeing his designs perpetuated through good teaching, seeing his vision extended into the future through men who understood not just how to build, but why. Across the training field, dozens of Quonset huts stood in neat rows, some permanent structures, some training mock-ups, all of them testament to a simple idea executed brilliantly, that the arch could solve problems, that corrugated steel could provide shelter, that good design properly implemented could save lives. The metal rainbows stretched toward the horizon, catching the afternoon light, casting long shadows, standing firm against whatever weather came. Simple. Functional. Elegant. Enough. Technical appendix, the reality of the Quonset hut. The actual history. The Quonset hut was indeed developed at Quonset Point Naval Air Station in Rhode Island in 1941, based on British Nissen huts from World War I. The design team, led by the firm of Merrill, Sims, and Beale, created a structure that could be mass-produced, easily transported, and rapidly assembled by small crews with minimal equipment. Key specifications of the standard Quonset hut. Width, 16 feet, 20 feet, or 40 feet, most common was 20 feet. Length, expandable in 4-foot sections, typically 36 or 48 feet. Height, approximately 8 to 10 feet at center. Materials, corrugated galvanized steel panels, steel arch ribs, wooden end walls. Assembly time, 6 to 10 hours with trained crew of 8 men. Foundation, wooden beams, concrete pads, or compacted earth. Weight, approximately 6,000 to 8,000 pounds for complete structure. Cost in 1941, approximately $1,000 per unit. Production numbers. Over 160,000 Quonset huts were produced during World War II. They were deployed to every theater of war. Post-war, thousands were sold as surplus and repurposed for civilian use. Design principles that made it successful. The arch shape, the semicircular arch distributes loads evenly, making it incredibly strong for its weight. This principle has been understood since Roman times. Arches convert vertical loads into lateral thrust, which is transferred to the foundation points. The Quonset hut applied this ancient principle with modern materials. Corrugated steel, the corrugations, ridges and valleys in the metal, provide rigidity while keeping weight low. A flat sheet of steel would buckle under stress, but the same steel pressed into corrugations can support significant loads. The corrugations also create channels for water runoff, making the structure naturally weatherproof. Modular design, every component was standardized and interchangeable. This meant mass production was efficient, replacement parts were readily available, and assembly required no specialized knowledge, just following basic instructions. Minimal tools required, the design could be assembled with basic hand tools, wrenches, hammers, screwdrivers. No welding, no heavy machinery, no specialized skills. This was crucial for military deployment where conditions were often primitive. Adaptability, the basic structure could be modified for various purposes: hospitals, barracks, storage, offices, workshops, even churches and theaters. Interior configuration was flexible since there were no load-bearing interior walls. The engineering. The structural integrity of a Quonset hut depends on several factors working together. Arch action, when weight presses down on the curved roof, the force is channeled along the curve to the foundation. This is why ancient stone arches could span wide distances without collapsing. The geometry itself provides strength. Panel interlocking, the corrugated panels overlap like shingles, with the corrugations fitting together. This creates a surface that acts as a unified whole rather than individual sheets. Water flows naturally downward due to the overlap pattern. Rib system, the arch ribs, steel members that form the skeleton, are spaced 4 feet apart and connected by purlins, horizontal cross members. This creates a rigid frame that resists lateral movement and distributes loads. Foundation anchoring, the arch ribs attach to foundation plates, which must be securely anchored. In soft ground, like the Pacific Islands, this was often the greatest challenge. Engineers developed various solutions: driving piles, using expansion bolts in coral, creating gravel beds, or pouring small concrete footings. The human element. What made Quonset huts successful wasn't just engineering, it was the human systems around them. Training. The Navy developed comprehensive training programs, similar to what Marcus Webb ends up running in this story. By 1944, most CB battalions had personnel trained in Quonset construction. Documentation, detailed technical manuals with step-by-step instructions and illustrations made it possible for inexperienced crews to build successfully. The manuals were continuously updated based on field experience. Logistics. The military supply system ensured that components reached forward areas. Each hut came in numbered crates with all necessary parts, organized for sequential assembly. Adaptation. Field crews developed countless modifications and improvements: better weatherproofing techniques, faster assembly methods, ways to join multiple huts, insulation systems for cold climates, camouflage patterns. This practical knowledge was shared informally and eventually incorporated into official procedures. Post-war legacy. After World War II, Quonset huts had a significant impact on civilian architecture and culture. Surplus sales: the government sold tens of thousands of surplus huts to civilians. They became farm buildings for equipment and livestock storage, small business facilities, workshops, stores, warehouses, emergency housing during the post-war housing shortage, community buildings, churches, social halls, temporary schools. Architectural influence: the Quonset hut influenced post-war architecture in several ways. Demonstrated that prefabricated construction could be high quality. Proved that simple geometric forms could be functional and economical. Inspired the development of other prefab building systems. Contributed to the modernist aesthetic of the 1950s, 60s. Cultural impact: Quonset huts became part of American cultural memory, symbols of wartime ingenuity, practicality, and can-do spirit. Many are still in use today, 80 years after their invention. The story's accuracy: while the characters in this story are fictional, the situations and technical details are based on historical reality. Seabees, naval construction battalions, did build infrastructure under combat conditions throughout the Pacific. Quonset huts were indeed assembled in as little as 8 to 10 hours by trained crews. The design did prove remarkably resilient against typhoons, bombs, and tropical conditions. Field hospitals in Quonset huts did have significantly better outcomes than tent facilities. The rapid deployment of infrastructure was a genuine strategic advantage for American forces. Training programs were established to disseminate construction knowledge. Individual Seabees did receive commendations for construction achievements. The story of Marcus Webb is fiction, but it represents the real experiences of thousands of Seabees who built infrastructure across the Pacific, often under impossible conditions, enabling the Allied victory. The lesson: the Quonset hut story illustrates several important principles. Good design solves real problems. The hut wasn't trying to be beautiful or innovative for its own sake, it was solving specific problems: rapid deployment, ease of construction, durability, flexibility, with elegant simplicity. Simplicity scales: complex systems fail in complex ways. The Quonset's simplicity meant it could be manufactured by thousands, shipped anywhere, and assembled by anyone with basic training. Human factors matter: the design succeeded because it accounted for human limitations, minimal tools, untrained crews, stressful conditions. Engineering that ignores the humans doing the work is bad engineering. Iteration improves outcomes: the design was continuously refined based on field experience. This feedback loop between users and designers created a better product. Context determines value. In peacetime Rhode Island, the Quonset hut was clever. In wartime Pacific Islands, it was revolutionary. The same design, different context, radically different impact. The Quonset hut reminds us that architecture and engineering at their best are about solving human problems elegantly. Not every solution needs to be cutting-edge or complex. Sometimes the best answer is a simple curve of corrugated steel, standing firm against the storm. END